Barbra Streisand, Vladimir Horowitz, Adele, Hugh Grant, Chopin, all people who have suffered from performance anxiety. Horowitz was so crippled by it that he took 4 leaves from performing throughout his career. Similarly, Barbra Streisand refused to perform for the general public for 27 years, appearing live only in private clubs and charity events. Hugh Grant gets anxiety attacks the minute the camera starts rolling and has admitted to filling himself with sedative losarrazepam to get through filming one of his movies. Cellist Pablo Casals stated, "Nerves and stage fright before playing have never left me throughout the whole of my career. Can you realize that at each of the thousands of concerts I played at, I felt as bad as I did on that first occasion?" It's not just the performing artists either. Athletes often crumble underneath the pressure of competition, feeling their own and the public's expectations, all while the world is watching them. But even for people who don't perform for a living, the National Institute of Mental Health reports that public speaking anxiety affects 73% of the population. Performance anxiety, stage fright, choking, whatever you want to call it, plagues many of us at some point in our lives. I have performed in small student recitals since I was a kid. I can't even remember what half of the pieces I played were, but I still distinctly remember the feelings of anxiety and fear that would keep me up at night for weeks leading up to my recital. This fear of performing in front of others was one of the major reasons why I hated playing piano so much as a kid. But even though I love playing piano now as an adult, performing still scares the shit out of me. Even just recording myself for YouTube brings back those emotions. The sweaty palms, the butterflies in the stomach, the fear of what others will think when they watch it. While part of music making is deeply introspective, music is an art form that is meant to be shared, and I want to feel comfortable sharing music without this looming fear in the back of my mind. In an attempt to conquer this fear, I've researched the psychological and physiological causes of performance anxiety and investigated how we can transform the anxiety into something productive. In this video, I will be sharing my learnings, and I hope it can help you if you also struggle with performance anxiety. So in my last video, I researched why memorizing music is so difficult, but I didn't get to touch on what happens when you add the pressure of performing on top of that. Something that you've done thousands of times before becomes infinitely more challenging when you have to do it in front of other people. But whether it's music, sports, dance, or giving a speech, we really only get nervous about performing when it has deep meaning to us. The more important that it is, the more we want to perform at our best. And this self-inflicted pressure floods our mind with anxious thoughts, which then fills our body with hormones. The anxiety, stress, and fear triggers the fight or flight response in our bodies, which is responsible for the physical sensations that we feel when we get performance anxiety, like increased heart rate, sweaty palms, churning of the stomach, and the urge to literally flee from your performance. Even though we aren't facing anything life-threatening, the brain can't tell the difference. Normally, in a highly practiced performance, activity in the prefrontal cortex, which is used for decision-making and attention, is subdued. That way, the brain circuits that are responsible for the routine, such as the motor cortex, can carry out the task unimpeded. When performance anxiety becomes overwhelming, the prefrontal cortex kicks into high gear, which interferes with the brain circuits and leads a person to fumble or choke under pressure. But the thing that starts this entire domino effect are the negative thoughts. According to author Arlin Cuncic and psychologist David Sussman, performance anxiety is common among those who also experience social anxiety disorder and those who are critical and self-evaluative before, during, and after performances. They state problematic thinking is often at the root of musical performance anxiety. Thoughts such as, "My performance needs to be perfect," or "I'm a complete failure," or "I had a good performance tonight, but I must have just been lucky," create and maintain anxiety. Other types of emotions that might cause performance anxiety are not feeling good enough or imposter syndrome, the fear of being judged by the audience if something goes wrong, and fixating on the negative, like the small mistakes that were made, even if the rest of the performance was okay. Do any of these sound familiar to you? Because I'm pretty sure I've had every single one of these thoughts. The root of these problematic thinking patterns most likely stem from traumas that have happened in our past and may not even be related to music at all. I have an older sister and a younger brother, so growing up as a middle child, I felt like I always had to prove myself. It made me grow up with this belief that I wasn't good enough, which eventually led me to develop perfectionism, thinking that if I was perfect, I would be worthy. I also have immigrant parents who raised me in a very traditional Vietnamese way, which means being overly critical of your children and not acknowledging when they do something well. This happened to me not just with my piano playing, but with all of my academic achievements, which led me to be highly critical of myself, a major contributor to my performance anxiety. I used to think that perfectionism was a good thing because it meant that I pushed myself to produce my best work. But now I know perfection doesn't exist, and pressuring myself to reach for that only causes damage to my self-esteem, unnecessary amounts of stress, and overall unhappiness. While understanding where the root of our negative thinking comes from does help, we still need to untrain our minds from automatically jumping to these thoughts. There isn't really a quick fix here. Traumas that have affected us since childhood can take years to undo. We might even battle them our entire lifetime. Many people seek professional help by going to therapy, but the thing that has personally helped me reduce negative thinking is meditation. When we practice meditation, specifically single-pointed meditation, where you sit and focus on one thing, we are learning to observe our thoughts objectively and for exactly what they are, just thoughts. Like it's the job of our lungs to breathe air, it's the job of our brain to have thoughts, whether we want them to happen or not. But the thing is, we don't need to listen to every thought that pops into our head. We also don't need to judge ourselves for having those thoughts. Remember, it's just an involuntary reaction conditioned by our past traumas. Meditation helps us observe the thoughts and then let them go, to treat the mind chatter as just background noise. Kind of like when you go to a restaurant with a friend and there's conversations happening all around you. You hear all the noises, but you're not really paying attention to it. Over time, with daily practice, we can recondition ourselves to dismiss the negative thoughts and reduce how often they happen at all. I'll be linking some of my favorite guided meditations in the description below if you want to check them out. Now, in terms of things we can do with our music practice, it goes without saying that there's no substitute for preparation. Obviously, we need to feel prepared to make us confident in our performance. But say we've done all the work and we are prepared, what other things can we do to help us cope with the performance anxiety? A tip I really liked from the YouTube channel Play in the Zone is picking something to focus on ahead of time, such as listening to the sounds, feeling your body sensations, or some other aspect of the music. That way, if any anxious thoughts start happening while you perform, you'll be prepared to bring your attention back onto whatever you chose. What I like about this is that you can practice it beforehand and get really good at focusing your attention until it becomes almost automatic. I think this also helps us stay very present, as anxious thoughts usually happen when we anticipate and worry about difficult passages that are approaching. Picking something to focus on helps us stay in the moment and prevent those anxious thoughts from happening. Staying present is really a state of mind, and it also helps me calm my nerves, whether they're music related or not. Have you ever noticed that we only really worry about things that have happened in the past or things that haven't happened yet in the future? It's only in the present where we can stay stress-free, and I have to remind myself of this if I get overwhelmed with anxious thoughts leading up to a performance, or in my case, I guess, a video. If you also have perfectionist tendencies like me, it's important to lower our expectations and reframe the purpose of the performance in our minds. The goal of the performance is not to be note perfect, and it likely won't be. Performing is an act of generosity, sharing not just the composer's music, but also a piece of ourselves. Pianist Madeleine Bruiser states in her book, The Art of Practicing, "What I loved about performing was the chance to give. It took into the core of my generosity and brought a feeling of oneness with the audience and the composer." A performance is, in a sense, a microcosm of life. We have one chance, and we want to give it everything we have. When we give freely, we experience our passion and vitality, which is a gift to us in return.
There are so many different feelings that you feel during concert because you are surrounded only by sounds, and whole concentration in the hall of 2,000 people or 200 people, in both situations they're concentrated on your sound, the sounds that you actually provide. So when you concentrate so much just on sounds, it's true that some strange feelings you can discover in yourself. And especially when you're doing this almost every day, it's true that you can develop one side of yourself which was not probably developed before.
Some performers believe that the nervous energy that we feel before and during a performance is actually necessary to perform at our best. Stevie Nicks said, "If you have stage fright, it never goes away." But then I wonder, is the key to that magical performance because of the fear? I think Stevie might be onto something here. According to the Yerkes-Dodson law, you reach your peak level of performance with an intermediate level of stress, or as they call it, arousal. But too little or too much arousal results in a poor performance. Without some stress, we wouldn't have the attention or motivation required to perform at our best. But too much stress becomes unmanageable, making us unsettled, distracted, and triggers fight or flight. The optimal level of stress is going to be different from person to person, but I think the important thing is knowing that some of the nervous energy that we feel is actually a good thing. The adrenaline makes us more alert and focused, so the goal shouldn't be to get rid of these feelings completely, rather just shift our perspective on what those feelings mean. See the feelings as excitement, not nervousness, and know that it's actually going to help us perform at our best. The excitement might even change our performance from how we rehearsed it, but instead of seeing those deviations as bad things, we should look at them as spontaneous moments of inspiration that happened because we're performing, and it's how the music wanted to be expressed in that moment. The adrenaline might make us play faster than how we practiced it, which to us will feel wrong, but to the audience will look virtuosic. The slightly longer pause that we might take to us will feel like a hesitation, but to the audience sounds like deliberate phrasing. To quote Arthur Rubinstein, "At every concert, I leave a lot to the moment. I must have the unexpected, the unforeseen. I want to risk, to dare. I want to be surprised by what comes out. I want to enjoy it more than the audience. That way, the music can bloom anew. It's like making love. The act is always the same, but each time it's different." As you know, it's impossible to control what happens during a performance, so instead of trying to, why not do the opposite? Surrender to whatever happens in the moment. Trust in yourself and the preparation that you did. Don't judge the outcome. Remember that the audience isn't there to listen to a note-perfect performance. Otherwise, they would just listen to a machine play. They are there to witness something human, something vulnerable, the most honest expression of who you are. You are there to share that with them, and that's what really matters. I wish that there was some quick solution for performance anxiety, but there isn't. The more that we do it, the easier it becomes, but that takes time. Quieting the critical voice also doesn't happen overnight. It's a gradual process that we have to constantly work on, but it is possible. I hope that this video helped you see performance from a different perspective and inspires you to share the music that you've been working on. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you next time.